Episode 1: The Arrival. In a forest so quiet that even the trees seemed to sleep, there stood a temple known to almost no one. The path to it had long vanished under moss and roots, and only those who had stopped searching with their minds could ever find it with their hearts. The temple rested beside a perfectly still lake, round and silver like a forgotten mirror. Each morning the mist would rise in long strands, curling above the surface as if the lake itself breathed slowly, calmly. The wooden beams of the temple had darkened with age, and the stone steps wore the memory of long-gone sandals. Birds did not sing here. Wind passed without rustling. Time moved as water does, without urgency. One morning, just as the mist began to thin and the sky turned from gray to the softest shade of blue, a young man appeared. His name was Kaito. His robe was travel-worn, frayed at the hem, and a thin layer of dust clung to his skin. His face held both the resolve of a seeker and the weariness of one who had found only questions. In his eyes lived silence, restless, waiting. He stood at the temple gate, uncertain if he should knock. Before he could act, a sound met him, not a voice, but the faint brush of a broom on stone. An old monk appeared at the top of the steps. He moved slowly, sweeping with gentle, even strokes. His back was bent not with weakness, but with long patience. His robe, simple and unadorned, blended with the shadows of the wooden beams. He did not stop. He did not speak. But his gaze met Kaito's and lingered there. Kaito bowed deeply. "I have walked far," he said softly, "seeking something I cannot name. I was told a teacher lives here, one who uses no words." The monk gave no answer, but the broom paused for the space of a breath. "I have heard much," Kaito went on, "read more, and spoken too often. The more I tried to understand, the further it slipped away. I am not here for lessons, only for stillness." The monk leaned the broom gently against the wall and turned toward a small wooden door. He slid it open without a sound, revealing a simple room. Inside, a straw mat, a folded blanket, a single lantern, and a wide window overlooking the silver lake. "You may stay," he said, his voice barely above the hush of morning. "But remember, quiet is not the absence of answers. It is where they are born." Kaito entered the room without hesitation. He set down his bundle, removed his sandals, and sat cross-legged by the window. The lake shimmered without a ripple. A dragonfly hovered, then landed on the sill. Mist still clung to the water, slow to leave. He exhaled and did not speak again. The old monk returned to sweeping, and the wind passed by, not stirring a single leaf. Episode 2: The Days Without Words. Kaito awoke to the hush of water lapping gently against the lake's edge. The room, still dim with early light, held no sound but the steady rhythm of his breath. He had slept without dreams, or perhaps the dreams had been made of silence too, so weightless they left no trace. Each morning followed the last without ceremony. The old monk brought him a bowl of rice and tea at dawn, then vanished into the quiet temple grounds. No greetings, no teachings, only the presence of shared space, like two stones resting at the bottom of the same stream. At first, Kaito's mind resisted. Thoughts circled, tugged, reached. He remembered old lessons, old masters, whispered phrases meant to sound profound. He tried to meditate, then questioned if he was doing it correctly. He sat, then stood, then paced before sitting again. The silence was not yet his companion. It was a mirror he had never learned to look into. One afternoon he watched the monk sweeping again, always the same pattern, always the same gentle focus. Kaido approached and opened his mouth to speak, then stopped. He had no question, only a restless need to be seen. The monk looked up and met his eyes briefly. Then he returned to sweeping. Ashamed, Kaido walked back to his room. That evening he lit the lantern and watched the flame flicker against the window pane. The lake reflected its twin without hesitation. The next day he joined the monk in the garden, kneeling among the stones. The monk handed him a small rake and gestured to a corner of the dry sand. Kaido began to shape gentle lines, unsure of the purpose but soothed by the motion. There was a rhythm to it. Draw, breathe, smooth. He did not notice when the monk left. He stayed until dusk without once counting the time. Days passed, or perhaps it was weeks. Time no longer pressed into hours and tasks, became light shifting on the floor, the soft crunch of gravel under bare feet, the sound of wind brushing against reeds. Kaido began to rise with the light and sit by the lake before the mist lifted. He no longer thought of what he was supposed to understand. He simply sat and watched. Birds came and went. A turtle blinked from a rock and slid back into the water. Leaves fell without regret. And in all this, he began to notice something unfamiliar. A feeling not of knowing, but of resting and not needing to. One evening, as he knelt to refill the water basin, he saw the old monk seated nearby, eyes closed, hands resting palm up. Kaido sat beside him without a word. The sun dipped low, painting the lake in molten gold. For a long while they sat, not together, not apart, just still. And Kaido understood, not with his mind, but with something quieter, that some questions dissolve not through answers, but through presence. Episode 3. The Unseen Lesson. Rain came without warning. One morning, the lake lay hidden beneath a veil of falling water. The forest blurred, the temple walls darkened, and the roof above Kaido's room began to echo with gentle drips and soft tapping sounds. He sat near the open window, wrapped in a woolen shawl left for him without a word. The scent of wet earth drifted in like a quiet guest. The days of rain brought slowness. Even the birds seemed to wait. The monk did not sweep. There was nothing to clear, only wet stone and flowing gutters. Instead, he sat beneath the eaves, watching the same gray sky move past. Kaido joined him sometimes, but more often he remained indoors, listening. Each drop seemed to hold its own place in time. In the stillness of rain, his thoughts softened. No longer pressing forward or circling back, they arrived gently, like the ripples from a single drop in the lake. He remembered his journey, the temples he had visited, the teachers who had spoken with thunder in their voices, their scrolls and riddles and warnings. He had tried to collect truths like coins, hoping they could one day purchase peace. But none had led him here, not truly. What had brought him was something else, an exhaustion perhaps, or a quiet refusal to keep pretending he understood. Now, in the quiet rain, he began to see differently, not clearer, not deeper, just less needfully. He noticed how the trees leaned toward the lake without needing to reach it, how the ripples made no effort to remain, how even the cold wind did not try to stay. One morning the rain stopped. Mist rose again from the lake. The world glistened with newness. The monk walked out into the garden and stood still. Kaido followed, unsure what had changed. The monk raised his hand and pointed toward the water. There, barely visible, a single cherry blossom floated, carried from a tree that bloomed far up the slope. It drifted silently, turning with the current, then disappeared beneath a soft ripple. Kaido looked at the monk. The monk said only, "Let that be your teaching today." And he walked away. Kaido stood at the edge of the water, uncertain what lesson he was meant to find. His mind, tempted to search, hesitated, then paused. The blossom had not tried to arrive, nor had it resisted where the current took it. Perhaps that was the point. That evening, Kaido returned to his mat, lit the lantern, and stared into the flame. For the first time, he did not wonder if he was progressing. He did not seek approval. He did not wish to leave, nor did he long to stay forever. He simply was. That night, as the moon rose above the still lake, he dreamed, not in symbols or stories, but in silence deeper than words. And when he awoke, there was no sense of before or after, only the quiet sound of wind through dry reeds. Episode 4. The Departure That Stayed. The morning air was crisp, the lake glass smooth. Kaido sat beneath the temple's worn gate, watching the reflection of the clouds drift across the water like slow thoughts passing through a still mind. He had not counted the days. Seasons had not yet changed, but something within him had. He no longer waited for answers. He no longer avoided the questions. He had come in search of something nameless, and in finding nothing specific, he had received more than he expected. It was not clarity, not revelation, not transformation. It was a kind of quiet becoming. The monk approached carrying a bundle, Kaido's, the robe worn and folded, a staff, simple and smooth, a pouch of dried rice. He placed it beside Kaido without a word and sat across from him. For a long time neither moved. Then the monk spoke, for the first time in many days. "The path back is the same as the path here," he said, "but your feet will not walk it the same." Kaido nodded, understanding more than the words could say. "You will forget this silence," the monk continued. "Noise will tempt you again. People will ask you what you learned. You may even try to answer." Kaido smiled faintly. "I will try not to." The monk raised his eyes, and for a moment his gaze held something deeper than instruction, something like a blessing without form. "Even if you forget," he said, "the lake does not forget you, nor the wind, nor the stillness you shared with them." Kaido bowed low, his forehead brushing the wood of the gate. Then he rose slowly and took the bundle into his arms. The staff fit his hand as though it had waited for him. He turned to leave, but paused. He looked once more at the lake. Mist was rising again, curling above its surface like a final exhale. He felt no pull to stay, but neither did he feel that he was truly leaving. Some part of him, he sensed, would remain seated by that window, watching the heron, listening to the silence between raindrops. The trail was no longer hidden to him. It was clear, though overgrown. He stepped onto it and did not look back again. The trees closed gently behind him, and the temple returned to its stillness. And though the lake no longer held his reflection, it remembered his presence, as the sky remembers the path of birds, and silence the warmth of a spoken name.